Fort Benning, Georgia, July 1975, 2:47 a.m. 12 soldiers sat in Barracks C, too wired to sleep. They'd just finished a brutal night combat training exercise, the kind that leaves your muscles burning and your mind racing. Most were 19, 20 years old. A few had seen real combat in the final days of Vietnam. All of them thought they knew what real fighting looked like. They were talking about the new civilian instructor who'd been brought in to teach hand-to-hand combat techniques. A martial arts expert from California, Hollywood guy, tournament fighter. They'd been through his first session that afternoon, and they weren't impressed. "Movie karate," Private First Class Marcus Webb said, still in his field gear, sitting on his bunk. "That spinning kick stuff doesn't work when someone's actually trying to kill you." The others nodded. These weren't fresh recruits. This was an experienced infantry unit recently returned from Southeast Asia. They'd seen real violence. They knew the difference between choreographed movie fights and actual combat. "I'm not saying he's not talented," Corporal James Mitchell added, leaning against the wall. "I'm saying it's not practical. You try that fancy footwork in the jungle, you're dead before you complete the spin." What they didn't know was that their conversation was about to become a lesson they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Specialist Robert Chen, the quietest one in the group, spoke up. "You guys know who that instructor is, right?" "Some tournament champion," Webb replied. "Won some competitions in California. The sergeant said he's done some acting. That's the problem. It's performance, not combat." Chen shook his head. "His name is Chuck Norris. He's not just some tournament guy. He was Air Force. He taught hand-to-hand combat to military police when he was stationed in California. Then he went Hollywood," Mitchell said. "That's my point. Once you start doing movies, you start doing things that look good instead of things that work." The debate continued. Half the barracks thought the civilian instructor's techniques were too complex, too reliant on perfect timing and positioning. The other half thought they should at least give the training a chance, but everyone agreed on one thing. What worked in tournaments and movies wasn't the same as what worked in real combat. Nobody noticed the door to the barracks open. "Heard you had some questions about practical combat." The voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it cut through the room like a knife. 12 soldiers froze. Some were sitting on bunks. Some were standing. All of them turned toward the doorway. Chuck Norris stood there in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain dark shirt, boots. No uniform, no rank insignia, nothing that demanded authority. But the way he stood there, relaxed but somehow completely present, changed the entire atmosphere of the room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Private Webb, the one who'd been most vocal about movie karate, slowly stood up. "Sir, we didn't mean any disrespect." "I'm not an officer," Chuck said, stepping into the room. "You don't have to call me sir, and you're allowed to have opinions about training methods. That's healthy. But I want to make sure those opinions are based on experience, not assumptions." He looked around the room. 12 young faces, some embarrassed, some defiant, all uncertain. "Who here thinks martial arts techniques don't work in real combat?" Several hands went up. Then more. Eventually, 8 of the 12 soldiers had their hands raised. Chuck nodded. "Fair enough. Who here has actually been in hand-to-hand combat? Real combat? Life or death? No rules?" 3 hands stayed up. The others lowered theirs. "Good," Chuck said. "Honest answer. Now, who here thinks they could defend themselves against an attacker right now, in this room, using only what you learned in basic training?" All 12 hands went up. What happened next would be talked about in Fort Benning for the next 3 decades. Chuck looked at Mitchell, the corporal who'd been agreeing with Webb's criticisms. "You saw combat?" "Yes, sir. Yes. 13 months in country." "Good. You know what real violence feels like? That's important. Chuck moved to the center of the room, where there was about 8 feet of clear space between the bunks. I want you to attack me. Full speed, full commitment. Try to take me down however you can. Use everything you learned. Mitchell glanced at the other soldiers. This felt like a setup, like a demonstration where the instructor would make him look foolish. "I'm not going to hurt you," Chuck said, reading his hesitation. "But I need you to actually try. If you hold back, this doesn't prove anything." Webb spoke up. "Corporal, do it. Let's see what happens." Mitchell stepped forward. He was 6'1", 190 pounds of muscle. He'd been in street fights before the Army, had military combat training, had survived actual firefights in Vietnam. He wasn't afraid of a fight. But something about the way Chuck Norris stood there, completely relaxed, hands at his sides, breathing normally, made Mitchell nervous in a way he couldn't explain. "Whenever you're ready," Chuck said. Mitchell took a breath. Then he moved. He came in fast, using a standard military takedown approach. Rush forward, grab the opponent, use momentum and weight to take them to the ground. It was simple, effective, and had worked for him in real situations before. What the other 11 soldiers saw happened so fast that none of them could fully explain it afterward. Mitchell rushed forward. Chuck didn't move away. He moved into the attack, but not the way anyone expected. There was no dramatic spinning kick, no telegraphed martial arts technique, just a subtle shift of weight, a redirect of Mitchell's momentum, and suddenly Mitchell was on the ground, not thrown, not kicked, just down. He landed on his back, unhurt but completely disoriented. The impact wasn't hard. He wasn't injured, but he had absolutely no idea how he'd ended up on the floor. The room went silent. Mitchell lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling. Then he started laughing. Not embarrassed laughter. Amazed laughter. "What the hell just happened?" Chuck extended a hand and helped him up. "You came in committed, which is good. But you were so focused on what you were going to do that you didn't see what I was doing. Real combat isn't about who's stronger or more aggressive. It's about who can read the situation faster and respond more efficiently." Mitchell rubbed the back of his head, still trying to process what had happened. "I didn't even see you move." "You did," Chuck said. "Your brain just couldn't process it fast enough to react." He looked around the room. "Anyone else want to try?" Webb stood up. He was shorter than Mitchell, but stockier, with a wrestler's build. "I do." "Good," Chuck said. "Same rules. Attack however you want." Webb had seen what happened to Mitchell. He wasn't going to make the same mistake. He'd go in lower, harder, faster. Not give Chuck time to redirect. He exploded forward, driving his shoulder toward Chuck's midsection, arms ready to wrap around his legs. This time, the other soldiers saw little more of what happened. Chuck didn't step back. He moved forward again, meeting the attack. His hands made contact with Webb's shoulders for maybe half a second. And then Webb was on the ground too. Not thrown hard, not injured, but down, flat on his back, staring up at the ceiling just like Mitchell had been. The silence in the room deepened. Webb didn't laugh. He just lay there, breathing hard, trying to understand what his body had just experienced. "I felt you push me," Webb said quietly. "But it wasn't hard. How did I end up on the ground?" "Because I used your momentum against you," Chuck said, offering his hand. "You came in fast and low. I didn't stop your momentum. I redirected it. Your body was already committed to going in that direction. I just helped it continue." Webb stood up, shaking his head. "That's not possible. I've wrestled since I was 12. I know how to keep my balance." "You do," Chuck agreed. "But I moved faster than your balance could adjust. That's not magic. That's timing and experience." Specialist Chen, who'd been quiet this whole time, spoke up. "Can you do it again? Slower?" so we can see what's actually happening? Chuck shook his head. If I do it slower, it won't work. The technique relies on speed and timing, but I can explain what's happening while someone else tries. He looked at the group. 3 of you have tried to hit me so far. Who's next? A younger Private Martinez stepped forward. He looked nervous. I'll try. Don't be nervous, Chuck said. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to show you that what I'm teaching isn't movie choreography. It's real technique that works against real attacks. Martinez nodded, set his stance, and came forward. This time he tried to throw a punch, a straight right hand aimed at Chuck's face. Chuck moved his head about 3 inches to the left. The punch missed by half an inch. Before Martinez could pull his arm back, Chuck's hand was on Martinez's wrist, guiding the momentum of the missed punch into a circle that turned Martinez's whole body around. In less than a second, Martinez was facing the opposite direction, off balance, completely vulnerable. Chuck released him before he fell. Martinez stumbled forward 2 steps, caught himself, and turned around with wide eyes. You moved before I even finished throwing the punch, Martinez said. No, Chuck replied. I moved when you committed to throwing the punch. There's a moment, right before you fully extend your arm, where your body has already decided what it's going to do. If you can read that moment, you can respond to the attack before it's fully launched. He looked around the room again. That's what I'm teaching you, not fancy kicks, not movie techniques, reading intention, responding to commitment, using efficiency instead of strength. The soldiers were all standing now, gathered around, completely focused. Here's what most people don't understand about martial arts, Chuck continued. They think it's about memorizing moves, block, punch, kick. But that's like thinking music is about memorizing notes. Real martial arts is about developing reflexes that are faster than conscious thought. It's about training your body to respond to danger before your brain finishes processing what's happening. Webb, still processing his experience on the floor, asked, How long does it take to learn that? Depends on the person, Chuck said. Some people develop it faster than others, but everyone can learn it. The question is whether you're willing to put in the time. He paused, looking at each soldier. You guys have real combat experience. That's valuable. But what you experienced tonight is combat, too. Different kind, but just as real. The principles are the same. Read your opponent. Control distance, use efficiency, stay calm. Mitchell spoke up. When you were in the Air Force, did you teach this stuff to military police? Yes, Chuck said. Different techniques, same principles. Most of what I taught was about restraint and control, how to subdue someone without seriously injuring them. But the foundation is the same, understanding timing, leverage, and balance. And that works against someone who wants to kill you? Webb asked. Not just restrain you, but actually kill you? Chuck's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes became very serious. Yes, because the same principles apply. Actually, they apply even more. If someone really wants to hurt you, they commit fully to their attack. That commitment is what makes them vulnerable. The more aggressive someone is, the easier it is to use their momentum against them. He stepped back toward the door. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to believe this works. But over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to show you, not in a demonstration, in training. And at the end, you'll either understand it or you won't. But at least you'll have tried it. Chuck looked at his watch. It's almost 3 a.m. You should get some sleep. We start again at 0600. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. What you felt tonight, that moment where you didn't understand how you ended up on the ground, that's what real efficiency feels like. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel powerful. It just works. And that's the point. He left. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, nobody in the barracks said anything. Then Webb broke the silence. I need to know how he did that. Mitchell nodded. We all do. What those 12 soldiers didn't know that night was that they'd just experienced something that would change their understanding of combat forever. Over the next 2 weeks, Chuck Norris would put them through training that was nothing like what they expected. No flashy techniques, no breaking boards, just principles, timing, distance, leverage, efficiency. 3 of those soldiers, Mitchell, Webb, and Chen, would go on to become professional martial artists after their military service ended. 2 of them would open their own schools. 1 would compete internationally, but all 12 of them would tell the same story for the rest of their lives. The story of the night, a civilian instructor walked into their barracks at 2:47 a.m. and showed them that everything they thought they knew about fighting was incomplete. Years later, in an interview for a military history project, James Mitchell, by then a 4th-degree black belt with his own dojo in North Carolina, was asked about his most influential training experience. Fort Benning, July 1975, he said without hesitation. Chuck Norris, middle of the night. I thought I knew what fighting was. I'd been in combat. I'd been in street fights. I'd been through military hand-to-hand training. But that night, I learned the difference between fighting and efficiency. The interviewer asked what he meant by efficiency. Mitchell smiled. Most people think fighting is about power. Who's stronger, who's tougher, who can take more punishment. But Chuck showed us that real combat is about efficiency. Minimum energy, maximum effect. I attacked him with everything I had, and I ended up on the ground without him breaking a sweat. Not because he was stronger, because he was more efficient. What did you feel in that moment? The interviewer asked. Honestly, I felt stupid. Not because he embarrassed me, because I realized how much I didn't know. I'd been arrogant. I thought my combat experience made me an expert. But Chuck showed me that experience without understanding is just repetition. Marcus Webb, interviewed separately for the same project, remembered it differently, but reached the same conclusion. That night in the barracks, Webb said, Chuck Norris didn't just demonstrate techniques. He demonstrated a philosophy. He showed us that real martial arts isn't about violence. It's about control. Control of yourself, control of the situation, control of your opponent's momentum. I spent the rest of my military career and my entire civilian life trying to understand what he showed us in those 2 weeks. The most powerful testimony came from Robert Chen, who became a competitive martial artist and later a trainer for law enforcement agencies. People always ask me about Chuck Norris, Chen said in a podcast interview in 2019. They want to hear about movie stunts or tournament fights, but what I always tell them about is that night at Fort Benning, because that's when I understood that martial arts wasn't about what you do to someone. It's about understanding how movement works, how balance works, how commitment works. Chuck could have hurt any of us that night, easily, but he didn't. Because the point wasn't to prove he was tougher. The point was to show us that we had a lot to learn. And did you? The interviewer asked. Did you learn it? Chen laughed. I'm still learning it. That's the thing Chuck taught us. Real mastery isn't a destination. It's a process. You don't arrive at it. You keep working toward it. That night, when I was lying on my back trying to figure out how I got there, that's when I became a martial artist. Because that's when I realized how much I didn't know. The commanding officer of that unit, who observed Chuck's training sessions over those 2 weeks, wrote in his report, Civilian instructor Norris demonstrated exceptional teaching ability and technical knowledge. Soldiers who were initially skeptical became highly engaged. Recommend continuing this type of specialized training for infantry units. But what the report didn't capture was the change in those 12 soldiers. How they went from viewing martial arts as choreographed movie fighting to understanding it as a legitimate combat skill. How they went from arrogance to humility to dedicated practice. That change started at 2:47 a.m., in a Fort Benning barracks when a quiet civilian instructor walked in and asked a simple question. Who thinks they could defend themselves right now? 12 hands went up. And then Chuck Norris showed them that confidence without knowledge is just ignorance waiting to be corrected. The lesson wasn't about humiliation. It was about possibility, about understanding that there are levels of skill beyond what most people imagine. That real mastery looks effortless because it is efficient, that the most powerful techniques are often the ones you don't see coming. Fort Benning, Georgia, July 1975, 2:47 a.m. The night 12 soldiers learned that Hollywood wasn't teaching Chuck Norris how to fight. Chuck Norris was teaching Hollywood what real fighting looked like.